Hey there and welcome. When we think about tech and the environment, our minds usually go to things like solar panels or shiny new electric cars, right? But what about the stuff that's, well, invisible? The software running on your phone, your laptop, everything. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this surprising and honestly kind of hidden connection between the code on our screens and the actual health of our planet.
Let's be honest. When you hear AI, your brain probably pictures something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Robots, sentient computers, the whole deal. But what if I told you its most critical job right now isn't in some far-off future, but right here, right now, on the front lines of our biggest environmental challenges? Okay, let's really get into this.
So, to kick things off, let's look at how AI is already playing the role of a powerful ally for the planet. We're going to dive into some incredible real-world examples that might just completely change how you see the code that powers our world. So how does AI actually pull this off? Well, it really boils down to three core superpowers. First, it can monitor. We're talking sifting through insane amounts of data, satellite images, sensor readings, stuff no human team could ever get through. Second, it uses all that data to predict. It finds patterns to forecast everything from where illegal logging might happen next to exactly how much energy a city's going to need tomorrow. And third, it can optimize, telling us the absolute best course of action to cut waste and boost efficiency.
Okay, so let's take that toolkit and see it in the wild. Literally. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, a nonprofit called Rainforest Connection had this absolutely brilliant idea. They take old, discarded cell phones, hook them up to some clever solar panels, and basically give them a second life as high-tech guardians of the forest.
So these phones are hidden way up in the trees, just listening. And this is where the AI magic really happens. It's been trained to know the difference between all the normal sounds of the rainforest and the sounds of a threat. It can pick out the specific buzz of a chainsaw or the sound of a poacher's rifle, and the second it does, bam, it shoots a real-time alert to rangers on the ground. This lets them get there and intervene, sometimes before a single tree is cut down. It's incredible.
That's an amazing story from the jungle, but this same need for efficiency is a massive deal in our cities too. And the scale of the problem is just huge. Get a load of this number, 60%. In a dense city like Hong Kong, 60% of all CO2 emissions come just from its buildings, mostly for cranking the AC or the heat. That makes them a huge target for improvement.
Okay, so up to this point, we've seen software as the hero of the story. But here comes the twist. What about the environmental cost of the software itself? Every single line of code, every website we visit, every app we use, it all consumes energy. So what is the real cost of all this code? It's kind of hard to wrap your head around the idea that the internet has a physical impact, right? It just feels like it's in the cloud. But look at this number, 416.2 terawatts hours. That is the insane amount of electricity that websites alone consume every single year. Just to put that into perspective for you, that's more than the entire country of the United Kingdom uses in a year. It's truly massive.
Now here's what's really mind-blowing. When you translate that energy use into carbon emissions, the internet is responsible for about 2% of global CO2 emissions. Now, 2% might not sound like a lot, but to put that in perspective, that's pretty much the same as the entire global aviation industry, all the planes in the sky. So yeah, every click, every video stream, every single Google search, it all adds up. But here's the good news. We can actually measure this impact now. The Green Software Foundation created a standard called Software Carbon Intensity, or SCI. And for the very first time, this lets us look at a piece of software and give it a carbon rating, just like you'd see on a new car or a refrigerator. And that's a game changer, because it turns this big abstract problem into something concrete we can actually fix.
And hey, if we can measure it, we can improve it. So that brings us to the principles of green software. We're moving away from just talking about the problem and into the practical, real-world solutions for building technology more sustainably.
The foundational idea here is actually really simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Not all code is created equal. The choices a developer makes at their keyboard can have a huge, huge effect on how much energy their software ends up using.
And here is a perfect example of that. Take two super popular programming languages, Java and Python. If you give them the exact same task to do, studies have shown that Java is dramatically more energy efficient. All of a sudden, a programmer's choice of language isn't just some technical, nerdy decision anymore. It has a real, measurable impact on the environment.
So let's look at a company that actually put this thinking into practice. A tech consultancy called Palo IT decided to audit its own website, and well, they were kind of surprised by what they found. They basically said, hey, our data transfer is way too high because our images are just too heavy.
And they didn't just talk about it, they took action. By doing something as simple as converting their images to a more modern, efficient format and shrinking the resolution a bit, they cut their website's total weight by a whopping 40%.
And you know, that 40% isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It translated into a real-world saving of 6 kilograms of CO2 for every 1,000 people who visited their site. It's just a perfect example of how these small, smart changes in code can have a really tangible, positive impact on the world.
So this kind of thinking scales up, right? It goes from individual coding habits to a whole company-wide mindset. To really make a difference, sustainability can't just be an afterthought you tack on at the end. It has to be baked in, integrated into the core strategy from day one.
A really important framework for this is something called ESG. That stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. And these are basically the standards that investors and the public are increasingly using to judge how a company is doing on things like sustainability and ethics. You know, it's about building responsible businesses, not just profitable ones.
And here's where it gets super practical. It turns out that a really popular way of working in tech, called the Agile methodology, aligns almost perfectly with sustainability. One of its core principles is already about maintaining a sustainable pace. So teams can just add their green goals right into their existing plans. And because they work in these short, iterative cycles, they can constantly check and adjust, building sustainability in from the very first version of a product.
And all of this brings us to our really powerful conclusion. In our digital world, sustainability isn't just about big government policies or infrastructure projects anymore. It's become a question of responsibility, especially for the people who are actually building our digital world.
The reality is this simple. Every single line of code running on a server, in a data center somewhere in the world, consumes energy. It has a real physical impact. And the choice of how much energy, how much of an impact, well, that choice is increasingly up to the developers who write that code.
So we've seen it, right? The tools to help the planet are here. The principles to shrink our own digital footprint are clear. The technology itself is not the barrier. The final question, really, is for all of us, but especially for those who build the software that runs our world. How will we choose to wield this power?